GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Tonight on Farage, no report from Sue Gray, but some questions about the Prime Minister's integrity. Did he actually authorise those animals, those cats and dogs, to be flown back from Afghanistan or not? We'll talk about his integrity. Sainsbury's and other supermarkets are saying we've got to go on wearing face masks. Really? How many more years of this are we going to put up with? And joining me on Talking Pints, a man who knows a lot about leading the Conservative Party and how tough it can be, Ian Duncan Smith. But ahead of all of that, let's get the news.
Good evening. Our top stories. Number 10 has confirmed it still hasn't received Sue Gray's report into the alleged parties in Downing Street during coronavirus restrictions. The Prime Minister told the Commons today he won't resign after the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer accused him of misleading Parliament on the alleged parties. Labour's now demanding Sue Gray's report is published in full after some cabinet ministers previously suggested the findings may be redacted for security reasons. Within the last hour, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has urged Americans in Ukraine to strongly consider leaving the country amid concerns Russia could invade. Russia has around 100,000 troops massed on its border with Ukraine. Antony Blinken said that the security situation there was unpredictable due to the increased threat of Russian military action.
Our message now for any Americans in Ukraine is to strongly consider leaving, using commercial or other privately available transportation options. While the State Department will always seek to provide consular services wherever possible, Russian military action would severely impact our ability to perform that work. And if Russia invades, civilians, including Americans still in Ukraine, could be caught in a conflict zone between combatant forces. The U.S. government may not be in a position to aid individuals in these circumstances.
Antony Blinken. Well, away from events in Ukraine, Downing Street has insisted Boris Johnson had no role in authorising the evacuation of animal welfare activist Pen Farthing and his animals from Afghanistan. That's come after an email released by the Foreign Affairs Committee indicated the Prime Minister had approved a charter flight for the former Marine after Kabul fell to the Taliban last summer. The rescue effort led to allegations that animals had been prioritised over people. During an interview in December last year, Boris Johnson was asked if he had authorised the evacuation, but he denied it.
No, that's complete nonsense, but what I can tell you is that I think that the operation of pitting to airlift 15,000 people out of Kabul in the way that we did over the summer was one of the outstanding military achievements of the last 50 years or more.
Boris Johnson speaking last year. The Home Secretary has struck a deal to return Serbians who have no right to remain in the UK back to their home country. Priti Patel met with her Serbian counterpart in London to broker the arrangement. Similar to agreements reached with Albania and India, Ms Patel hopes the pact will allow for quicker removals of failed asylum seekers, foreign criminals and those who've outstayed their visas. Extraordinary news now. A robot has performed delicate keyhole surgery on a pig without human help for the very first time. According to a study, the robot excelled at the procedure, which required a high level of precision. Researchers say it's a significant step towards fully automated operations on humans. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Farage.
Good evening. I did say last night that really nobody had a clue what was really going on. We were told the Sue Gray report was coming, then we were told it wasn't, then we were told it would happen today, perhaps a statement in the House of Commons. There is no report yet from Sue Gray. We know the Metropolitan Police are pursuing their inquiries, which depressingly, we're told, could last for several months. The debate in Westminster is, should Boris Johnson stay on as leader of the Conservative Party? But I think the debate in the country is one about Boris Johnson himself. Is he believable? Is he a man of integrity? Is he somebody that tells the truth? Can we actually trust him? And something that happened today in the Foreign Affairs Committee, I think, casts a little bit more doubt on Boris Johnson's relationship with the truth. Do you remember back in the middle of August last year, the catastrophic events following President Biden's decision to unilaterally withdraw from Afghanistan, and Operation Pitting was put into place for us to get people out of Afghanistan that had helped us and served us over the previous 20 years. In the middle of all of this, somehow a very large number of cats and dogs managed to get a flight out of Afghanistan. Now, Operation Ark for the INOWZAD charity was paid for by private donations, but the military were used to ease its passage and airspace was given. And there was huge speculation at the time as to whether the Prime Minister had been involved in this, or perhaps, more honestly, whether the Prime Minister's wife had been involved in this. Well, today, in the Foreign Affairs Committee, an email was given, and it came from the office of Lord Zach Goldsmith. And it's dated August the 25th. And it says very clearly, the PM has just authorised their staff and animals to be evacuated. It really couldn't be clearer than that. And further down in the email, it said, the PM has said anything that needs to be done will be done. But that directly contradicts what the Prime Minister said when he was asked a question on this on the 7th of December. Let's see what his answer was to did you directly intervene and allow the safe passage of those cats and dogs.
Did you intervene that way?
No, that's complete nonsense. But what I can tell you is that I think that the operation of pitting to airlift 15,000 people out of Kabul in the way that we did over the summer was one of the outstanding military achievements of the last 50 years or more.
Well, I struggle to find that believable. But in response to what was released today to the Foreign Affairs Committee, Number 10 tonight has responded by saying the Prime Minister had no role in authorising individual evacuations from Afghanistan during Operation Pitting, including INOWZAD staff, that's the charity, and animals. At no point did the Prime Minister instruct staff to take any particular course of action on INOWZAD. So you can make your own minds up. Either Lord Zach Goldsmith's office, who wrote this absolutely in the heat of the moment on the 25th of August, either they weren't telling the truth, or subsequently the Prime Minister wasn't telling the truth. But this is the problem. Again and again and again, the PM's relationship with the truth casts into doubt whether he is actually a man of integrity. I'm asking you, what do you think? Is the PM a man of integrity? Answers, please, Email farage@gbnews.uk. Now let's try and find out whether we know any more about Sue Gray's report and what is happening in Westminster tonight. And joining me is GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Well, Darren, I did say last night that I just felt nobody had a real clue what was going on. Are we any clearer this evening as to what's happening with Sue Gray's report?
No, in many ways we're not, Nigel, to be perfectly honest. There was much speculation it was going to come today, not least of all because we know the report itself has been concluded, and we think that the hold-up and delay involves, surprise, surprise, lawyers. That lawyers are going through this report, not least of all because the police investigation is now involved, and as Downing Street put it today, they don't want them to kind of rub up against each other or cut across each other, so the Met is involved at that stage. And it is likely, because this report is seemingly going to name names, that maybe the HR department in Downing Street or the Cabinet Office is involved as well, considering there could be consequences for some of the people named in that report. Yep. Now, we know the timetable of what will happen in that this report will be published. It seems to be that essentially it will be published in full, Downing Street insisting that was kind of going to be the case today, and that the Prime Minister, having released it, will then go to the Commons to answer questions. So essentially it's not going to be in the middle of the night or anything like that. But ultimately, is it going to be tomorrow? Well, it's Holocaust Memorial Day. There's a convention in British politics that announcements and major decisions aren't put out into the public on that day. Also, it's only a one-line whip in Parliament, so many MPs might not be there. So it could drag into Friday. Parliament is sitting on Friday. It could drag into next week. In the end, Nigel, what I'm trying to say is, no, we don't know. We don't, frankly, when this report is going to be released.
Yeah. No, I think sometimes saying we don't know is a good, honest answer. Darren, is it your feeling that the longer this drags out, the better it is for Boris Johnson's survival within the Parliamentary Conservative Party?
Yeah, I think in some ways what the Prime Minister needs to hold on to at this stage is time. He just needs time. And let's be frank about this. This is something that has been a bit of a winning formula for Boris Johnson. He just hopes something will turn up that means that the wind will change, that suddenly things start looking better for him. And frankly, that has helped, even in this crisis, that the lulls of time in some ways have cast doubt, allowed him to call MPs to try and convince them that he should remain in office. Also, clearly, lots of MPs now saying we should be focusing on what's happening with Ukraine and Russia. But in the end, I think, Nigel, the proof will be in the pudding. And what I mean by that is, it's the content of Sue Gray's report that ultimately will force MPs to make a decision about whether to back him or sack him. It will be at that moment, when it's all there in black and white, that they will ultimately have to decide what to do. And I think, irrespective of whether this drags into next week or the weeks after, which I don't think it will, it's when that report gets released and when he stands in the Commons, that will be the moment that his future will be decided.
Well, we will have to wait. Darren, thank you very much indeed. Well, joining me now to debate all of this is The Sun's associate editor and, of course, former political editor of The Sun, Trevor Kavanagh. Trevor, I saw today in The Sun your piece, Back the Boss, and then the Tories must honour their election pledges or keers in. Isn't one of the problems here that even before Partygate broke, and you know, look, we're all getting bored with endless stories, but they're coming, and Cummings is deeply vindictive, very negative. I don't think he could give a damn what happens to the party, the country. But even before all of this broke, you know, you were saying in your columns that we have a Conservative Prime Minister in with an 80-seat majority, fantastic opportunities to fix our borders, to bring in supply-side reform for small business. And what we've seen is a Tory party putting up taxes and going for a net zero policy that actually will beggar ordinary people. Even before Partygate, weren't there real problems with the direction that Boris was taking the Tory party in?
Yes, and I don't think that David Frost, for instance, left without thinking very, very seriously about these problems, which have been growing. I mean, the government, and I wrote this, and also I spoke to people in Downing Street about the image of the government wallowing. It seemed to be doing nothing. It had all this advantage. It had its majority. Yeah. It hadn't done anything about free ports or actually about immigration. It's done nothing to send anybody back home who have arrived here illegally. Those are key points, really, I think, for the voters who went for Boris in the first place, plus lots of other things like deregulation, all the things that, in theory, Brexit should have been able to give us. And the benefits of Brexit that have taken place have, in a sense, been almost accidental. Things like Unilever coming across from Holland and the Royal Dutch Shell and the fact that we've got the euro. This is the city. It's nothing to do with Boris, who is Prime Minister, who seems to be sitting there. And this is why so much support has disappeared. The balloon has sort of lost its capacity for supporting him. And people are disappointed. They voted for him for good reasons, and he's not. He's disappointed.
All of that analysis, much of which I agree with, but all of that was true before Partygate broke.
Very much so.
And now what we have, and I see this battle, I get Conservative MPs sitting where you are, and some defend him and some don't. We make sure the viewers get both sides of the argument. But I think what everyone's forgetting here is there's a bigger issue out in the country, and it is a question of trust. Is the Prime Minister a man of integrity? Is the Prime Minister a man whose word we believe? Because we can excuse people getting things wrong. We can forgive people holding their hands up when they've made mistakes. What we can't live with, and I think some of this goes back to Blair in Iraq, the feeling that Blair wasn't honest with us over Iraq, and that's kind of stuck, I think, with our politics for all these years. When you see this testimony, and you may say it's a minor issue, you may say pen farthings, cats and dogs is a minor issue, but actually it gets to the heart, I think, of what the country is trying to make up at the moment in terms of its own mind. 25th of August, Zach Goldsmith makes his office make it clear the PM has just authorised the INOWZAD staff and animals to be evacuated. When the PM's asked about it, he says it's not true. Is he a man of integrity?
Well, I think trust has been blown out of the window altogether in the last few days and weeks in a way which I think is almost irreparable. And frankly, this latest development, this revelation about INOWZAD and these cats and dogs, who I understand half had to be put down when they arrived because they're mangy. That is, frankly, possibly one of the worst things about all of the revelations. Okay. Having a cake and a drink during lockdown, when you could argue that Downing Street was basically a factory working 12-hour days during a pandemic crisis, you might arguably excuse some of that, although, of course, in many ways is inexcusable. This, I think, was an outrage when people were clamouring to get out of Kabul. Ben Wallace would have commandeered that plane and taken it over and put people in it, not dogs and cats.
Is Mrs. Johnson a problem?
It seems to be the case. I mean, look, I've only heard what other people are telling me, obviously, on this, but nearly all the questions sort of lead back to Carrie, the green issues, the dogs and the cats and so on. Animal sentience, all of these things which I think aren't really the top of the agenda for most people who voted for Boris Johnson in 2019. So, yes, I think that is a problem, and I think that he, in the process of doing the things that seem to be new completely for Boris Johnson, he's ignoring the things that got him the job.
Absolutely. I mean, Trevor, it's interesting talking to you. You agree with me that trust has been broken between him and the voters, that he's not really pursuing Conservative policies, he's not really honouring what those Brexit voters particularly, many of whom came to the Conservative Party for the first time in their lives, wanted. I do get the argument you're making about the lack of a suitable alternative, but is he really the right man to continue? And if he does stay on, isn't it almost inevitable that Starmer wins the next election?
I'm not sure that he will be able to stay on, even if he gets through the Grey report in the next few days and weeks. I think that the May elections are going to be the key factor. And I think that's been the case almost ever since North Shropshire, which I think actually is the real point at which things started to go almost unforgivably wrong for the Tory party, within the Tory party. I'm talking about the question of the leadership. That was a catastrophe which sort of came and went, but it didn't go really. It was an issue of judgment which reflected badly on Boris, and it left it lost them one of the safest seats in the country. So that, I think, will be looked back upon as the point at which things changed as far as Boris's chances of survival were concerned. And I think that if he gets through to the point of the May elections, he'll be lucky. And if he gets past the May elections without losing an enormous number of seats.
Yes, and we got Wandsworth, Westminster in London, some of these big flagships,
Yep.
and I think sort of Tory abstentionism could be their really big problem. I mean, it's a long way off, but that's how it seems to me at the moment. Trevor, nobody could see Mrs. Thatcher coming in 1975. Nobody could see John Major coming through the middle in 1990. I certainly couldn't see Theresa May coming through in 2016. So the idea in the press that if Boris goes at some point this year, that it's either Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss, I just don't believe that. I think history shows us that big surprises can happen in Conservative leadership elections. Do you see any dark horses out there that you think could somehow bring back to Conservatism that kind of populist edge that it needs?
Well, one of the problems with the candidates who will be running is that some of them are Remainers. I don't think that the Conservative Party can afford to have a Remainer as Prime Minister right now, especially when you hear from people like Heseltine and Adonis saying that this is their opportunity to reverse Brexit. He will be under tremendous, whoever it was, say it was Jeremy Hunt, wouldn't have a chance of holding the party together. This is when Boris, if and when Boris goes, there will be a seller's remorse and a huge black hole left behind, because there will be a scramble to fill that seat, and the talent, unfortunately, for the Brexit side rests in large degree among candidates who aren't very well known, but who are quite vocal and very articulate.
Yeah, well, look, let's give Boris credit for one thing. We did get Brexit, albeit imperfect. The vaccine rollout proved that not being in the European Union was the right thing to do, and he was the man. He was the man for that last half of 2019. How long is he going to last, Trevor?
I think the big problem is that lack of trust that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I think once you've lost trust, like an avalanche, it's almost impossible to recover. So it's a matter, I think, of time, and it's not very much time.
Trevor Kavanagh, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on GB News. Coming up in a moment, a major supermarket is urging its customers to carry on wearing masks. I'll ask, how many years are we going to have to put up with all of this?
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Well, another tough day for Boris Johnson. Not the Sue Gray report, but the revelation from Lord Zach Goldsmith's office that he'd authorised, absolutely, the INOWZAD animal charity to get that flight out of Kabul airport at a time when many people who wanted to board planes couldn't do so. And he's just outright denied it, not just once, but twice. I'm asking whether he is a man of integrity. Kim says he is an animal lover. He just couldn't leave them. It wouldn't have been right. Don't think that was my question, really. One viewer says the public didn't willingly vote for a man of integrity. They voted for a total rascal. They knew, and they don't care about the parties or the dogs. I think to some extent that's true. I think we did know that he is a bit of a rascal in lots of different ways, but we do at least expect him, don't we, to tell us the truth? Jason says, I think the integrity of those surrounding him is more in question. With friends like them, who needs enemies? Harry says, no, he is a serial liar, but I voted for him knowing that was the case. Ian on Twitter says, do you really need to ask that question? We all know his relationship with honesty is tenuous at best, and yet people gave him a stonking majority. Well, they did. But, you know, there was a reason for that. We had been through 3.5 years of absolute agony ever since that Brexit vote, and we wanted something decisive done about it. Now, as you know, the government are lifting, at least in England, many of the regulations, including the need to wear face masks. Hooray, is what I say. And yet, big retailers like Sainsbury's, John Lewis and Waitrose will continue to ask their customers in England to wear masks in their shops when Plan B rules end tomorrow morning. Well, I just think this is outrageous. I mean, how many more years are we going to go on living like this? Have I got this wrong? Medically, have I got this wrong? Well, joining me to discuss this is Dr. David Nichols from Doctors Association UK, who is a consultant neurologist. So, David, tell me, I mean, I felt tomorrow was a liberation. We could go to the shops and we didn't need to wear those horrid face masks, and we could sort of almost feel life had gone back to normal. But you think Sainsbury's are right, do you?
I do, and that's because I'm afraid this was a political decision. It certainly wasn't based on any public health evidence. There's lots of evidence from other countries. If you look at what happens in Asia, South Korea, and they've avoided a lot of the lockdown side of things in South Korea, is by good use of face masks. And I would say wear the right size mask. And, you know, I'm afraid our health policy is driven by more about keeping the right wing of the Tory party happy.
Well, I mean, there is a question of liberty, there is a question of choice. I mean, what interests me about this face mask debate, you know, is early on in the pandemic, you know, Van Tam was saying there is no evidence that the general wearing a face mask by the public will affect the spread of the disease. So to begin with, we were told by the experts who were getting up and doing those daily 5 o'clock briefings, the experts told us face masks made no difference. And now we're hearing from experts that they do. I mean, who's right here?
But that's because the knowledge is clear that COVID is airborne, and there's a lot of things we could be doing. And that's the problem we're seeing now with cases, particularly higher in younger people, is we've failed to deal with ventilation in schools. I think it's been a mistake and that we haven't thought about masks in schools. And also think about the quality of masks is important. So, I mean, Doctors Association have campaigned since the beginning that healthcare professionals have decent-sized PPE, and it's only just this month they've changed the policy for these FFP3 masks. And, you know, if I was out and about in the supermarket, I would be wearing an FFP2 mask. It is hardly a human rights violation to wear a mask when you're doing a weekly shop. But yet, that's, you know, if you look at the Desmond Swains of this world, they say they're, you know, genetically immune from wearing a mask, which is just ridiculous.
But David, what if COVID lasts and comes back every winter for the next 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 years? Are we to go on as a society that perhaps for 10 years or more has to wear face masks when we go to do the weekly shop? Is that really what we're saying?
Well, COVID doesn't get bored, okay? You might get bored, but COVID does not, okay? And, you know, we know there's, 4 million people aren't vaccinated. And actually, this is about doing the right thing as a community. Just tonight, I was actually speaking to a patient of mine I've known for 20 years who has a very severe form of neuropathy, works as a teacher, okay? So she's clinically vulnerable. When you go out to the shops and wear a mask, you're helping to protect people like her. And actually, I think this should be a case of good manners, actually, that people are wearing a mask. And part of the problem...
So really what you're saying is that COVID-19 is going to fundamentally change the way we live for many, many years to come.
for the moment, that's not just me saying that. I mean, the World Health Organization were saying this on Sunday. And I think it's really important that broadcasters like yourself are responsible on this. Not just with masks. I mean, I've had arguments with presenters where they describe it as a muzzle. And, it's really not helpful. And it even relates to the vaccine debate as well. I've had similar arguments. I mean, I've actually reported GB News, not your show, different show, for spreading health misinformation to Ofcom.
David, I don't want to wear a mask, and if I go into Waitrose at the weekend, I really don't want to wear a mask. If they insist, I will wear a mask rather than storm out in protest. But look, I make sure that the viewers get both sides of an argument, and I did introduce you by saying that, perhaps medically, you would tell me that I was wrong. But I will ask you this question. I will ask you this. The bombardment we're under to get the booster is quite extraordinary. Letters, phone calls, public advertising campaigns, and yet there's still a very large minority have chosen not to have the booster. And here's why. Because they know that having the booster, you can still catch COVID-19 and you can still spread COVID-19. And isn't it perhaps the moment at which we treat those that have chosen not to have the booster or not to have the vaccination with a little bit more respect?
And that exactly is why we need to do all of this. It isn't just about vaccine. It isn't just about masks.
Okay.
It's doing all of it. And, I would urge, when you see people like, the Steve James of this world, when there's 1.2 million people in the NHS, you will get some cranks, okay? So for someone like that to say there isn't enough science about vaccines, yet at the same time promotes, and I kid you not, vaginal steaming, okay? For which there is no science.
It's too early in the evening. It's too early in the evening for all that. But David, seriously, you're not calling up to 100,000 medical professionals cranks, are you?
Well, no, not at all. And the problem is when that gets broadcast, okay, that sort of stuff goes viral on social media. I've done a lot of work with vaccine hesitant staff, and those kind of debates never come up. What does come up is the kind of debate about natural immunity, that kind of argument. And that's actually pretty easy to deal with, is that not everyone generates an antibody response. Safest way to get immunity is to get vaccinated. So, maybe we should have you, Nigel, leading a campaign to get people vaccinated.
David, I respect the right of those who choose not to. And if they're taking risks with their own health, then so be it. There are many other personal choices that affect health. But what I don't want, David, is to live in a country where those who choose not to get a medical treatment are discriminated against. Almost a new form of medical apartheid. And that's the one thing I feel strongly about. But look, I will always, David, allow you and others to come on the show and make your argument, of course.
I'm a Liberal Democrat. I agree.
Very good. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening. Right, well, there you are, some very, very strong views there from David Nicol. Now, other interesting things that are going on. Given the rows that have been going on in Westminster, there's one issue that has barely had a mention. And yes, it's something that I've been talking about for the last 2 years, and I've been predicting will get worse and worse. And that is migrants crossing the English Channel in inflatable dinghies, and 90% of them, maybe more than that in some cases, being young men. Well, we're off to a start in January. The number thus far this year is well in excess of 1,300. That's in the month of January so far. And have a look at this trend. 2018, 299 people that we know of illegally crossed the channel. 1,844 in 2019, 8,461 in 2020, 28,401 in 2021, and that number of 1,308, which is as of the close of play last night, not tonight, that number is 6 times the number that crossed the English Channel in the whole of January last year. Just to give you some idea of what's going on, and the government, the authorities know what's happening, because there isn't just now a processing centre at Dover, as there's been all the way through this. There's now one at Lydd Airport. There's also one at Manston too. So there are now 3 processing centres for those crossing the Channel in Kent. And I think the Home Office know that this year it is going to be 50, 60, 70,000. Who knows? It's an issue that isn't going to go away, and whether Boris Johnson stays as Prime Minister or whether somebody else takes over, this in the Red Wall is one of the really, really big issues. Now, let's have a bit of good news, shall we? My What the Farage moment. We were told by virtually everybody, particularly the big banks and the big corporations, that if we left the European Union, it would be a catastrophe for the City of London. Well, Lord Heseltine and others, if you're watching, try this for size. A report by EY says nearly 90% of major global financial services firms have said they will either seek to set up shop in the United Kingdom or boost their current operations. That is an absolutely overwhelming global vote of confidence that London, the UK, is the right place to do financial services business, not Frankfurt, not Paris. It never, ever was going to be. Now, the big clue. This is interesting. I did an interview at the end of November with Donald Trump. I tried to push him as hard as I could as to whether he'd run again as President of the USA. His response was, well, Nigel, if you love your country, you've got no choice. Well, have a look at Donald Trump playing golf yesterday and see if you can spot the clue. Here's Donald Trump.
Lucky. We'll be lucky if we're up. We got it.
So he's on the first tee.
First on tee. 45th President of the United States. 45th and 47th. 47th.
There you go.
Yes, I love this. Ladies and gentlemen.
So, announced as the 45th President of the USA, Trump confidently says that he'll also be the 47th after the next elections, which take place in 2024. Some more of your responses. Raymond says, if Boris did help in the rescue of those dogs, then I'll be supporting him after all. Well, but that's not the issue. The issue is whether he told the truth. Brenda says, does Boris ever tell the truth? Andrew says, of course he is a man of integrity. Just ask all of his wives. Ooh. Anne says, good for him. One thing he's done right. And one viewer says, no, I don't think Boris Johnson is a man of integrity. However, now is not a good time to lose a Prime Minister. Coming up on Talking Pints, somebody who is an expert on being leader of the Tory party, Ian Duncan Smith, Conservative Member of Parliament and, of course, former leader of that party.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
GB News Tavern is open. It's Talking Pints. And my guess is that our guest this evening, as a Conservative Member of Parliament, could probably do with a drink. Ian Duncan-Smith, welcome to Talking Pints. Now, we've got you here under completely false pretences because we wanted to grill you about the Sue Gray report, but that isn't going to happen. It's interesting, Ian. I mean, you know, before politics, you were a soldier. Your father, an incredibly distinguished Battle of Britain pilot with, I don't know how he sort of managed to wear all the medals that he managed to accumulate.
5 gallantry medals he had,
Yeah, 5.
5 gallantry medals,
Just astonishing. What on earth makes somebody go into the snake pit of politics?
Well, funny enough, when I announced out that I was in business before, after the army I went into business, and when I announced out to my father that I was thinking of going into politics, of course he's from the generation that got deeply distrustful of politicians because of what happened during the 30s and then ended up fighting a war, and he said, my God, he said, I thought I brought you up better than that.
Well, he was right, really, then, wasn't he?
That was it, really. I think that was the last comment he probably uttered to me about it, really.
But you've been there 30 years.
Sorry?
You've been 30 years now.
Well, 29, 30 years coming up this April the 9th.
Yeah, 30 years in the House of Commons.
I know, horrid, isn't it?
You've had some big ups.
Lots of downs.
Lots of downs. And I don't want to be unkind to you, but because I do genuinely think, Ian, that in political terms, you're like a good claret. I think with age, you're getting better and better and better. But having said that nice thing, let's just remind you, perhaps, of a moment that wasn't quite so great. Let's have a look. This is when you were leader of the Conservative Opposition Party.
We must destroy this double-dealing, deceitful, incompetent, shallow, inefficient, ineffective, corrupt, mendacious, fraudulent, shameful, lying government once and for all. And to those who doubt and those who deliberate, I say this: don't work for Tony Blair. Get on board or get out of the way, for we have work to do. Minister, I say this: the quiet man is here to stay, and he's turning up the volume.
That was really cruel of me, wasn't it?
That's all right, I didn't mind that.
Well, there's no such thing as a free drink, I guess. I mean, you had a very difficult time as leader of the party. Blair was on cloud 9. There was nothing you could frankly do about it, and he was there for years. And it ended in it was tough for you.
Well, you know, the Conservative Party had come out of a regicide. Well, in the case of Margaret Thatcher, not a regicide. But the reality was that that had divided the party dramatically and led to serious problems. And then, of course, 97 was a disastrous defeat. We were down to about 160 MPs. So being leader, I'll be honest with you, wasn't really quite intended, in the sense that we were standing to try and make a point about where the party should go. But having been there, I didn't regret any of it. You can't look back and regret it. It was tough. It was tough because, nobody was interested in listening to us.
And the press were vicious.
Press are always vicious because, of course, when you're down, they like to kick you. That's not a problem. I'm used to that. But the reality was that for the party, they just hadn't got their heads around the idea of it would be good to be back in power. So, I used to say my party could have an argument in an empty room, but the only problem was the empty room won on every single occasion. And that was really a definition of who we were at that stage. And so building back had to start with the party waking up one morning and going, actually, do you know what? It's time to stop tearing chunks out of each other and start going forward. And you've just seen the Labour Party for the last few years tearing each other apart. It happens to political parties until they finally discover you
and
get nothing done.
I watched you going through all of that. And as I say, the press were pretty vicious. And in the end, you stood aside as leader. And I kind of thought, well, Duncan Smith, he's been there for a decade. As you say, the army, business, he's going to leave politics. He's going to walk out because he'll be able to make a lot more money in the private sector, live without all that stress. But you kind of stayed on and found yourself a new mission, didn't you? Well, why did you stay in politics?
Well, two things very quickly. One is, during the time that I was leader, I had become very focused on the areas around the UK that had literally broken down. So communities where it didn't matter who was in power, nothing ever reached them. Visits to Gallowgate and Easter House and parts of Bristol and London, all these places. I realised that actually what we needed to do was try and figure out what had gone wrong and learn from it. And then I started to learn that there were lots of small community groups and charities that were solving problems, that if only we could listen to them, we could get that done on the top. So after I'd gone, I'd made a pledge to 2 of these areas to go back and visit them, regardless, because politicians come and go and they never go back again. So I went back and it was
And
there.
kept your promise.
Well, I did. I wanted to keep a promise because I felt really badly that politicians always promise stuff and don't deliver. So I went back, and then from that I set up the Centre for Social Justice. Now it's a big organisation, but it draws its ideas from the ground level, from charities and community groups. So we did modern-day slavery. That's now law, the first country in the world to do that. But huge changes. Universal credit came from that, which I had to drive through when I was back in government. It does. And in fact, during COVID, it proved itself completely because, number one, you didn't have queues in job centres because they could do it online. And secondly, they were able to target and get to every single family. So in that respect, you know, nothing is absolutely perfect, but it has worked remarkably well, even so much that the Labour Party now say that they will keep it and develop it. So, you know, getting that through will have helped lots of people during COVID, saved their lives in many respects. I'm not taking credit for that, I just simply say that was the right thing to do. But doing that came out of listening to what people said, which is we need a much better balanced system. And I'm pleased that the Chancellor has decided to treat it like a tax and then lower the tax. After all, why do we tax the poorest the most when it comes to their benefits? It's far better to encourage them back into work by taxing them less. Yeah. Good Conservative principle. So he did that during the last budget, and I was pleased about that.
So these were sort of your wilderness years, in a sense, going around Easter House and all the rest of it?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, actually, somebody said to me, why did you pick politics? And everyone talks about politics as a career. And I always argue it's not a career. Because if you want a career, go and be a banker or a lawyer or something, or run a business, because you can pick and choose, you can go from one company to the next, you can change what you do. You can't do that in politics. By and large, if you come in with a party that spends all of its time in opposition, you'll come in and go out again, and you'll not see any government
But isn't the point, Ian, isn't the point, Ian, that, you know, people like you, people like me, you know, we get into politics, we've got backgrounds and other things. We get into politics because we've got strong passions, strong beliefs. But there's a heck of a lot of the Oxbridge set, you know, who've never done a proper job in their lives, of any kind at all. It's, you know, age 22, it's working for a think tank, it's in Parliament by the late 20s. Isn't there too much of that in the Conservative Party? And the Labour Party too? Yeah, it got like that, actually, fun enough. It wasn't like that before. It started to drift in that direction probably in the 80s, really, more than anything else. But, you know, post-war, lots of people with medals on their chests. When I came in, there were very few soldiers, ex-soldiers, in Parliament. Now it's different because of Afghanistan and Iraq. It's fantastic. There are lots and lots of ex-servicemen, and it's changed the debate on the service. Interesting. And it's added potency to it. So it's really important. But I take the view, politics has to be a vocation, because if you came in wanting furtherance and government posts, you're going to be nothing but disappointed. So you need to recognise that you're here because you want to change things. If you don't want to do that, really you want to think again about being in this game. It's you know it's a rough old trade. Oh, it can be. If you can't put up with it, then something has to be else that's there. Yeah, it can be absolutely brutal. But you sort of come back, don't you? You come back into senior positions. You come back into cabinet, and then Brexit comes along, and I remember. Back at the Maastricht rebellions, I think I'm right in saying you were the only one of the 92 intake that joined that final Maastricht rebellion. So the Europe issue had meant a lot to you right from the very beginning.
Yeah, I didn't really think about it before I came into Parliament, and then I was confronted with the Maastricht Treaty. Yes. I blotted my copy of it before I even got elected by signing a letter saying basically don't sign it, John Major, which I think I was surprised actually they stuck with me in the next election. It would have been far better for them if they hadn't. But so from there on in, I just came to the conclusion very rapidly that I just didn't think everything my father stood for and all the things that I believed in, I just felt that if we did Maastricht, I said at the time that Europe will leave the United Kingdom, because Maastricht is moving in a direction that nobody ever voted for. We voted to join a market, to get access to it. We didn't join a political union that would in itself almost replicate a country. So I said, the moment you sign that, we're on courses away from each other. May not happen in my lifetime, I felt, but it will happen. In fact, it happened in 2016. And I think we will be better off for it. I know people argue, oh, we shouldn't have done. No, the truth is, we are big enough to be able to negotiate our way through the world and at the same time get on and be friends and cooperate with our allies in Europe. And that's how the relationship should be.
Monsieur Macron's a bit difficult at times, but then...
Well, you know, Šefčovič perhaps needs to rethink his the Northern Ireland Protocol. We shouldn't have a foreign government have it rules in the United Kingdom, full stop. We must get rid of it.
Trevor Kavanagh made the point earlier that some of the good things that are happening are just happening. You know, it isn't happening because of anything government's doing. And I talked before the break about the fact that 90% of global financial services firms are saying London is the place in Europe, and you know, if they haven't got investments here, they're going to have investments here. So there is great opportunity. I also thought the AUKUS deal really, really mattered. You know, us getting together with. But one of the things, Ian, that you've really, and I know that you know, the referendum, and it meant a hell of a lot to you, and you were very active, and you came out of it with great credit. Yep. China, explain to me, help me. How can it be that we discovered just a few weeks ago that there's a sort of quite high-ranking Chinese spy in the middle of Westminster? I haven't heard a word since.
Well, I'm sanctioned, as you know, by the Chinese government, amongst others, and my colleague, and Tim Lawton, Nuzgani, and various others in the Lords as well. And the truth is that China, I felt we've had the wrong relationship with China. Under the George Osborne time, we went for this golden decade. And I was very worried when I watched that, genuinely worried that we were heading to a closer set of ties with a dictatorial government. And one of the things that was said to me at the time, oh, don't worry, because at the end of it all, the free markets will change the Chinese system and they'll eventually embrace all the liberalism and democracy that we have. And I just said, no, I don't think that's the case. Now what we've seen is President Xi has taken it in the opposite direction. So this is a very dictatorial and brutal regime. It's committing, no question, genocide on the Uyghur. It's pretty much done the same with the Tibetans. It's cracked down on Christians. It's taken over the South China Seas, threatening Taiwan, trashed the Hong Kong agreement with us. And it's arresting people literally all over the world. So in the UK, we've been warning for some time now. We have to be tougher on the idea of where China is. They've been in our nuclear industry. Our universities are almost completely now conditioned to Chinese money, which is really worrying. And lots of Chinese postgrad students are getting involved in British defence contracts. What happened to us? When did we stop worrying
Ian,
about
you're
this
passionate
regime?
about this, and I've spoken to Bob Seeley on this programme and others. But the truth of it is, so much of the British establishment seem to be completely relaxed about this.
It's changing.
Are the establishment selling out to China?
It's changing. I think one by one, people are beginning to realise, actually, we gambled that China would end up in one place. They haven't. They've gone to another, which is to double down on really tough, brutal regime politics. You know, as I say, genocide, brutality, slave labour.
Can we make ourselves less dependent economically on China?
Yes, we have to. And this is the key to it. China is dependent on us as much as we are dependent on them. In a sense, it's our money that's flowing to China. Here's the irony. This is what happens when you don't worry about a form of government that you have in China. China doesn't tell the world it has a strange new virus. Whether it was in the laboratory or not, I'm not even arguing that. For ages, for nearly 2 months, they don't tell the WHO. What happens? It spreads all over the world. Millions die as a result of this. Now I find that when it comes to testing and PPE, all our imports have gone through the roof because we're buying all of this stuff from China now.
I know.
So here's the ridiculous irony. Many millions have died because of their brutal failure to tell the world what happened. Meanwhile, now we're having to go to them to buy our stuff. We have to move off to other countries like India and others, and here in the UK, lots of manufacture now should be here in the UK. We need to make sure that we get those costs down, but there's lots of reasons why added value could come here. We need to reinvest in the UK.
Is China a bigger threat than Putin?
Well, I call them the axis of evil now, which, of course, Reagan used originally. We now have... Originally, Russia dominated China in world politics. It's gone around the other way. What's happening is China's watching this Ukraine saga to see how we react. We've seen Germany go weak and wobbly on us because of their dependence on gas. The UK, to be fair, is leading on this. But the key question is here, they watch. If we don't settle this, China will see Taiwan as the next step. And this is our problem. You know, they are together on this. Then if you add in Belarusia, you then start to look at what happens in Iran. When Iran sees the same, you're getting this axis. History is repeating itself. We're still seeing genocide now, and I think today and this week, we are commemorating the Holocaust. Did we learn nothing from the Second World War?
It's a very good question. Ian, finally, how long is Boris going to last?
Well, look, you know, I supported Boris, and I'm going to wait for the report.
Support Ed?
Yeah, well, I supported him in, you know, when I was running his campaign. He has capabilities which most politicians don't. You know, he can excite an audience, he can sell a message in a way that I haven't seen since Reagan, really. You know, as a political salesman, he is literally supreme. Now, all of this stuff should never have happened. There's no even he's admitted and questioned, said no, this should never have happened. They should have not lost. And this whole idea that we were all in this together, if signs should have been on the doors saying, when you finish work, go home, don't stay around. So, yes, all of that. But I think unless there's some particular serious point where you can demonstrate that there was clear knowledge about what was going on and it was encouraged, I like to think that, honestly, we need to draw breath for a second and ask ourselves a single question. If we start down that road of ending another Prime Minister, what are we ending it for? Now, the question really has to be, do we think that lessons could be learned? Do we think that these things can change? And that's going to be the judgment. And that right now we keep that open.
Do we think Boris Johnson can change?
He goes. Well, it's wholly feasible for us to make sure that we get the thing.
Okay.
The key is delivery. Come on. We voted for Brexit because we knew once delivered we could get huge change, regulations down, money flowing in, and I think we can do that. But we need to deliver that. And those are the big things. And we can sort out Ukraine, because if we don't,
well, this is going to run and run. Ian Duncan Smith, thank you for joining us on Talking Pints. Not that long left, but Lord Zach Goldsmith has tweeted, "I did not authorise and do not support anything that would have put animals' lives ahead of people's." Well, you better speak to somebody in his office then pretty quickly. But had he not? Right, it's Barrage the Farage. We can run through a few. Let's have a go. Robert asks, what needs to be done to raise the standards of honesty and integrity in Parliament? Come on, Ian, what needs to be done?
Well, the honesty is you're meant to be honest in Parliament, and that's how it works. And when you don't, that's a breach. You either apologise or you get out.
So it's very simple, isn't it? If anybody has lied at the dispatch box, they will have to go. Rob asks, how long will British armed forces last against Russian armed forces? It's so good that Duncan Smith stayed. In 20 seconds, Ian.
Well, we're not going to have armed forces in Ukraine, but what we have to do is make it clear to the Russians that if you step across that line, the consequences will be enormous, economic and military.
Yeah. Anthony asks, which is worse, and how will they be ranked by future historians? Watergate, Irangate, Categate. Don't worry, Categate is very low down on the list, but there is a big question about trust, and it's as simple as that. I'll be back with you tomorrow. In a moment, it's going to be Mark Stein. First, though, let's have a look at the all-important weather.
Good evening. A windy one tonight. Those winds steadily easing tomorrow. And for most of us, a bright, fine day with sunny spells and certainly across the south. Feeling really quite mild, certainly much milder than recent days. High pressure is just about holding on, but we do have this deepening area of low pressure just tracking to the north of Shetland, and those isobars really pinching together. So the winds getting very strong across northern Scotland tonight. We have a Met Office yellow warning in place across Orkney in the far north of the mainland. Gusts of 70, maybe 75 miles an hour could cause some disruption. At the same time, a zone of rain will slink its way from southern Scotland, Northern Ireland to parts of northern England and Wales, but with all the clouds and the fairly strong winds, temperatures will be holding up for most of us well above freezing. Will be a dull, damp start, though, for parts of Wales, particularly South Wales in the morning. Some of that patchy rain will trickle into Somerset, Devon and Cornwall through the morning as well. Not much rain further east, and brighter skies follow, so it's sunny spells for much of Thursday, but there will be showers in the far northeast, wintry on the hills, and a cold feel here with the wind, but elsewhere temperatures well above the average and quite a bit higher than recent days. 10 or 11 degrees, Manchester, Belfast, London, Southampton, maybe 12. Quite quickly, though, those